Get started. Good morning. Thanks everybody for coming out and getting here bright and early. My name's John McAllister. I'm a program manager at Microsoft. I've been working on master data for quite some time. And it's really great to be back here in Atlanta. It's really where my journey into data management started almost 21 years ago in late 1991. I was a IT manager trying to get back to my passion of programming and developing systems. And I landed a really good assignment here in Atlanta. I worked for a company just up the road here that has 100,000 brown trucks. You may know who I'm talking about. And the assignment was to help finance understand some things about revenue. And again, it was a really good assignment. At the time, it was in bleeding edge technology of Clipper. It's starting to probably... Does anybody even remember that? Okay, so there's some other old folks here with me. And it was a great assignment. And the financial part of the assignment, the allocations and the financial calculations, they were actually really easy. I don't think they were 2,000 lines of code. They were pretty easy to put together. But what bogged that assignment down was the collection and management and maintenance of the data that actually made that thing work. And I'm kind of slow on the uptake. I watched this pattern repeat over and over and over again for about 12 years before I even realized that there was a common pattern. And I've got to give a lot of credit to partners that I had over the years because they actually pointed out that, hey, this is something we should build a solution for. Over the years that I was in a role supporting finance with applications, a lot of things happened, right? We got integrated development environments, we got object-oriented program, we got relational databases, we got a lot more connectivity, and so we were able to build bigger and badder and meaner reporting and financial analytic systems, but we still spent the bulk of our time collecting, ensuring that data that was the inputs into these systems, the hierarchical organizations of the data, factors, lists, tables, all those things that supported the system, we continue to estimate that we spent 80% of our time on data maintenance and prep. I still didn't learn for a long time, though. And then I went on to become a business intelligence consultant, and I probably became even more guilty in this respect. I'd get the shiniest new tool. I'd sell my clients on how quickly they could do a financial consolidation or how pretty the color graphs in their reporting would be. Sell the deal. 6 months later, I'd come back and say, how is it? And they said, well, the thing that you sold us is great, and now we've got 1 or 2 FTEs slaving day in, day out to get the data right to feed into the system. That started to change. In 2001, I co-founded a company called Stratature, and we set out to keep doing this same kind of BI thing, but finally, in 2003, it clicked for us, and we started to build a consolidated system called Plus EDM to help people just manage their dimensions. Over time, we realized it was a lot more than just dimensional data. It was the inputs that go into the various financial and reporting systems that we were building. That product was then acquired by Microsoft in 2007 and became what you see shipped in SQL Server 2008 R2. So that's kind of a long bio, but coming back here kind of got me to reflect on how I got here and the progress of my understanding of data management. Hopefully that serves as a good backdrop for this discussion. So enough about me. In this objective today, I'm going to try and help get you up to speed on what's in Master Data Services before I talk about what we're adding. And I want to get a little demographic here. I've done some different talks about Master Data Services, talks that build on Master Data Services over the years. And I still find that there's some people that come to these talks that just want to get the 101 or the 411 on MDS and what's in it. And I'd like an honest assessment of that, and we'll talk about how we get you that information. Who came just to hear about MDS in general? We're trying to get the base level. So between 40 and 50% of you are just trying to get that. So I'm going to spend some time on that, the people who came just to hear about Excel. All right, so I feel good about spending some time on the base level product too. Excel will actually help you understand the Master Data Services product. What we're doing with Excel, it's entirely built on it. So I think we have a good split of concentration and use of time. Then we'll go ahead, after we've gotten you up to speed, at least built a base level understanding. The other thing I want to point out is if you have a question, if you have something that's very detailed, or you want to have a deeper dive or have a very specific question, I'll hang around after this until they physically throw me out, and then I'll make my way down to the expo area, and I'll go to the database and BI track area, and I'll be available there all morning for questions, and I can answer your more specific questions. So if you've got a burning question, hold on to it through this, and I'll be available. So the bottom line is we'd like to help you understand how you can fix some of the data problems that you have in your organization. So, is there even a problem? How many of you have ever delivered a report that was inaccurate? Okay? What was the root cause? Was it data, or was it how you wrote the report? If it's how you wrote the report, get a book, get some help, get a consultant, fix that. I can't help you with that. If it's the data, who gets blamed? You guys get blamed. Who's really responsible for the data? If the data is an input, or if the data is something that sort of influences the outcome of the report, well, I would submit to you that it's actually the business that should understand and manage that data. And so I've got a kind of unfair situation here where you get blamed for data that the business should be providing. And hopefully today we'll fix that. The other concept I want to throw out there is something called informal systems. I mentioned in the opening that I built financial systems that relied on a lot of data. These were not systems that sat in the data center. These were systems that sat on accountants and marketing managers' desks. And does your organization have these informal systems? What platform do they run in? They run in Excel. So there's a lot of calculations, a lot of computations, a lot of things that influential knowledge workers in your organization maintain. And they maintain them in Excel. And some of them are doing really, really smart work in little tiny pockets where they can't share that work, where nobody can see what they're doing, where they can't leverage the work of someone else. And so informal systems are another place where you've got data that is by default not being managed in any way, shape, or form. In both reporting systems where you're just trying to manage the inputs or the dimensions, and in these informal systems, one of the key threads is that there is no process, right? How do I know something's ready to be consumed? How do I know if it's valid? How do I get the appropriate people to contribute to it and enable only the appropriate people to subscribe to it? So I think, at least from my perspective, I believe that there is a problem. So where does data come from? I've been in the room countless times now when I'm trying to sell a business user master data management, and there's this tension where the technology folks, that's us, say, well, data comes from systems. If we just have better integration with systems, we'll have all the data we need. And that's partially true. If you have data that's sitting in your ERP system or in your CRM system, or that you can buy from a partner, and that data forms the basis of your reporting or your analysis or your financial calculations or some marketing trend analysis report that you're doing, you can stop right there. If that data in and of itself is adequate to support the process or to support what you're trying to achieve. But in many cases, you have to augment that data, and so there's a process around that data. There's some transformation, there's augmentation, and you may pull more data together from external sources. What it boils down to is that people are actually the source of a lot of this data. And how do you harness data that's coming from people? Well, you're already doing it today, but it's happening in Excel, and it's happening on the fringes of things. And what happens in Excel, Excel's kind of like Las Vegas, right? What happens in Excel sort of stays in Excel, and that's not a good thing, right? So let's knock down some definitions. I hesitate to put this in here. The definition of master data management is sort of a can of worms. There are people who define that very, very narrowly in some very powerful vertical columns. So some of the definition of master data management is the system and processes to manage your customers or your products. That's customer data integration, or CDI, and product information management, or PIM. Those are the things that a lot of people in the industry would like to pigeonhole master data management as. I believe in a much broader definition. I believe that it's the nouns or objects or things that you want to manage in your business, and it's things that are worth managing. It's not the transactions, but it's the very rich set of attributes and relationships and hierarchies that surround what's important to your business. So if you run an airline, that's probably your airplanes. It's probably your pilots and your flight attendants. It's probably your baggage sorting facilities. It's those things that make up your business. If you're a sports agent, it's probably all of your contracts and all of the people that you represent. So it's those things that your business runs, and that's where the human handcrafted data builds up, is around those things. There's some other attributes of this kind of data that I continue to see, and that is that if you're in a large organization, the granularity of that data varies by where you are in the organization. If you're in central finance and you're trying to understand your sales, you probably think of the company General Electric as one thing. If you're a sales guy out in the field in Peoria, Illinois, you're probably thinking about people, or one little part of General Electric that you interface with. So you have different granularity, and you have different sets of attributes, and there's not a single thing throughout an organization that you're interested in. Yes, sir? I'm sorry.
Are you seeing it just being the dimension data, or also fact and measure data points are managed by?
Okay, the question is, do I see it as just the dimension data, or do I see the fact and measure information as well? So it is the first. It's the dimension data, but it's beyond just an OLAP perspective. So it's all of the attributes, all of the characteristics of the things that in a data warehousing sense we would call, or in an OLAP sense that we would call, a dimension. It is absolutely not the fact data that we're talking about here. The fact data is terabytes or petabytes, and the management of that is a different thing. It's not usually done directly by humans, right? And then measures gets into a kind of a metadata discussion. You can manage. I've seen a lot of people actually manage, and we're going to have a slide about some of the typical solutions with MDM, but I've seen people manage their measures just as a list of measures in MDM. Because it's small, right? Measures, your list of measures is relatively small. Did that answer the question? So another thing about master data is it should be shareable. Everybody who should contribute should be able to. They should even be compelled to contribute. And everybody who needs to use it should be able to subscribe to it and leverage it. Master Data Services is simply the software that Microsoft shipped in SQL Server 2008 R2 that enables you to do a lot of this. And we'll talk, the talk is obviously about Master Data Services. So some typical solutions. The first thing I'll say when people ask me about, well, what is the one solution, right? I get a new marketing person. I can't quite grasp this. Give me that one solution. Well, The answer is, to grasp it, you have to understand that there isn't one single solution that you do with master data services. I'm going to talk about just a couple of things that I've seen people do that will help illustrate what can be done. It's upon you to open up your mind and say, okay, I have this problem, this could solve it, or I have this problem and this is not an exact thing. If I hit a direct problem you have, great, but it's a lot of different things that people use master data management to solve. One of the problems that we see a lot is that multiple sources of data cause confusion or they cause reports to be incorrect. And there's an implementation of master data services out there at a North American consumer packaged goods seller where they don't actually know what is sold by each individual grocery store that sells their products. And so they buy that information from a variety of third parties, from a couple of different third parties. And so now they know what's being sold on the grocery store shelves in near real time, and they can optimize their supply chain, and they claim they can save nearly on the order of tens to hundreds of millions of dollars by optimizing that supply chain and avoiding stockouts. But there's one problem. Each individual retailer identifies those products with different codes. So they simply need a map to bring those codes back to their understanding of what the products are, and they need to add attributes and hierarchies that are specific to each portion of the sales force that works with those different retailers. So they use master data services to do that, and they've effectively given that capability back to the business. IT provides the infrastructure, but the business provides the mapping. If there's a gap, the business gets an email, and the business fixes it, because humans have to figure out what that mapping is and what the most appropriate way to link things up. And so it's given back to the humans that manage that. Another thing that we see is that if you have different lists that are kind of secondary or tertiary dimensions, sometimes called reference data, if that stuff's wrong, it will break your reports. A couple weeks ago, I was talking to a DBA of a very large marketing database, and he indicated that something as mundane as SIC codes, for just real briefly, an SIC code is just a 4-digit code that identifies the kind of industry that a company is in. But he's doing this for marketing, and they're very concerned about SIC codes, and they actually like to put additional attributes on those SIC codes to get additional insight into their customers. He's all the time breaking his dimension tables when those get either out of whack because they've loaded them from Excel or reloaded them from Excel. Because it's linked to Excel, they actually have to go through a deployment process, so they kind of have to come offline and redeploy it. With master data services, he's able to open that capability, or open the editing, put the editing of those SIC codes and their extended attribute set back on the business, and it just saves him the time of managing another interface with an Excel table or have to build something custom to support that. Another thing that MDS does, and it was actually the original purpose of the technology underlying MDS, is just managing dimensions. So anything that's got a hierarchical relationship where you need to drill down through things, and that hierarchical relationship can't be derived directly from the data, MDS has a visual way to edit and manage those hierarchical relationships that you can then automatically pull into your different cube systems, whether those are an OLAP system or whether it's a relational-based data warehouse. So this is how I view master data services. It's a managed SQL Server schema to store. So you store the identity of things, you store the attributes and the hierarchies around them. You don't work on SQL at the table level. You've got a managed schema. If you say, I'm creating a new model, MDS creates the new tables for you. MDS creates all of the relationships and constraints. You're able to secure that. You can secure that at the object level, so I can secure people out of whole tables. I can secure people out of columns. I can even secure people out of rows based on data values. So I can say that you can see the European centers, and you can see the Latin American centers, and you can see the North American centers, but you can't see any of the other stuff. So it's got a security mechanism in it. It enables you to manage transactions at a business level. You don't have to go back to the SQL table level to see transactions. It says, Fred turned the XRB019 from blue to yellow on May 19th, and he was wearing a blue shirt. And then you can review those transactions and annotate them so you can say what you were thinking at the time when you changed it. You're able to integrate and share the data. So there's two paths to integrate with MDS. I don't know if I call Excel another integration path or not. I'll let you be the judge of that. But there's really two foundational paths. There's an API, a WCF API. So if you like to write .NET code or you need to do something and have very tight control over MDS, you can put data in and take data out. And any operation that you can do in MDS is available through an API. That API is the only API that we use to control MDS. And that API also enables partners to build products over MDS. And there are actually a couple partners that have done that. There's even one here called Prophecy that's built that. There's another one in the UK called Visionware that's built over that API. So it enables you to take full control over MDS. How many of you guys are would consider yourself like DBA types? All right. The other way you can get data in and out is through tables, and that's kind of the quicker, easier, dirtier way to do it. But we have tables that enable you to stage data in. So kind of think of a front porch where you put data, and then you run a staging process, and it comes in without violating our schema. And we have views that are human readable. The schema is a little bit obfuscated, and you wouldn't actually work directly on the schema. But we have views that are very easy to link up to and pull data from. We enable process. So there's a stewardship UI or a web-based UI where somebody can come and make a simple data change. And I will touch that UI a little bit. That UI is also the administrative place where you build a model, where you set security, where you create versions. So it's the full control over the application happens through that. We have an Excel UI. We have integration with data quality services, which will be in the next release or the Denali release of SQL. And this is also where you would manage validations or a set of data validation rules and versions. And it's also, to enable process, we enable a lightweight workflow where we send you an email if something's wrong with the data, or we can start a SharePoint no-item workflow. The items in green are the things that are focused on in the Denali release, or the next release of SQL Server, and we'll talk about those in a minute. I'm always torn. If I don't put this slide up, people will hammer me on the review. Hey, I needed to see an architecture slide, or I even have people come up to me afterwards. And if I do put the slide up, there's some people that say, hey, this gets in the way of this story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the difference and go through this very, very quickly. You see down at the bottom, there's a database. That's a SQL Server database. It's a managed schema. Got staging tables coming in, subscription views going out. Anything that you can read data from a SQL Server database can be a subscribing system. Anything that can put data into a SQL Server table can be a contributing system. At the higher level, we have this WCF API. It also sends out notifications and workflows. Our web UI, our Excel add-in, partner web UIs all run over that service. And if you want to do some extensive integration, which is definitely not the focus of this talk, you could use something like BizTalk, or you could write your own .NET code directly. Architecture slide covered. I can talk about it offline in detail. So Denali, which is the next release of SQL Server, adds some improvements to the web UI. we've heard you guys loud and clear. The web UI has some problems in the current release. It's not optimal. I'm being very, very politically correct. It's got problems. We are improving the end user part of that web UI. We're putting a Silverlight web UI over it that's much easier to use, much easier to navigate, faster, more stable. We're adding an Excel add-in, which is what we're here to talk about, or what it's how I got on the agenda here to be able to talk about all the other things in the product. So it's at least the horse we rode in on. It's much easier to edit data and create new models. And it's also the place where integration with data quality services happens. Now, data quality services is a new feature that's shipping in this Denali release. And MDS and DQS will become more integrated over time. But in this release, Excel simply allows you to take data that's in MDS, take new data, match it using DQS, and then you're back in Excel to decide what to do as the resolution of those matches. We've improved the way that staging data comes in. In the current release, there's a single table to load all data, and it's kind of this very pivoted name-value pairs thing. We now have a table per entity or table in MDS. It's a couple of orders of magnitude faster. It's much easier to understand because you're not pivoting in your SSIS. How many people have actually used MDS? Yeah, so that's why he was nodding on the front row. This is much easier to use. It's also in a separate schema, so it's easier to secure, and it gives you much better error reporting. So just kind of general, much easier data in this case. We've improved a lot of other performance and usability, robustness, security, and scale things throughout the product. So we've taken feedback both in the form of bugs and just direct suggestions from our customers and tried to improve as much of that as we can in this release. So now let's get on to the business of Excel. What does Excel have to do with data management? I've been in the room a lot of times where somebody will say, Excel has nothing to do with data management. It's actually violently opposite to managing your data. It's unmanaging your data. It's distributing chaos. That's what Excel is. It's not data management. And if you said all those things, you'd be kind of right, except the people that do the management love this product that enables them to quickly manipulate large chunks of data. I sat with a sales guy, right? I was taken to task actually by a salesman who said, I don't care what you guys do in a web UI in your next release, it's not going to be as cool as Excel. I want to use Excel. So we heard him loud and clear, but his organization would like to actually have the information that he's worked on be worked on in a somewhat controlled fashion, be secured, be backed up. You know what's the correct version, right? All of those things are very hard to achieve in Excel. So let's try and put the two best aspects of having things be in a database and Excel together. So we had three patterns that we saw. And I'll admit, I lacked the vision when this started. I locked onto this first one. I said, yeah, let's make it so we've got this really cool interface. When I need to go clean up 500 records or bring in 70,000 new cost centers, I can just do it in this very powerful editing thing that's called Excel. And I locked onto that, right? I want to be able to use VLOOKUPs and string concatenation to edit my data. And we started to design it for this power user who's comfortable in Excel, and they're going to stay there. But as we were building it, we realized that the people in this room, you guys, would like to also be able to get this stuff set up easily, right? The current release of MDS, you got to do some work to set up a model. You got to go say, what are the tables or entities that I want to work on, and what are the attributes, make the links between those, and you're doing this in a web UI. We realized, hey, we can just point Excel at this data and we'll build the model for you automatically. And we'll see that in just a minute. As we made this part work well enough, we realized that somebody who maybe didn't quite have the technical background or was new to MDM could even go as far as managing or updating a model directly from within Excel, like adding their own new attribute or changing the type of an attribute directly in Excel. This last statement is kind of a bold statement, and it remains to be seen if it plays out, but it makes it a goal to at least make that Excel experience so easy that it's really great for the practitioner and for the powerful data steward. So we're going to go ahead and get into the demo. It's a good time to start really actually demoing the product. But I do want to set a little bit of a background for it. There are two experiences here, going back to this slide. We're going to focus first on what the powerful data steward would do. So we're going to pretend like you guys went back and set this model up for him and set everything up, and I'll be that powerful data steward just using Excel to edit data. Then we're going to turn back around and we're going to actually build exactly what we demoed from scratch. So with nothing in the system at all, we'll build that whole demo. So I think that's pretty cool to be able to do a demo for 10 minutes and then show how I built the demo in another 10 or 15. I think that's a pretty powerful ability to deliver that I'm going to show. Need some data to work on. I've got about 1,000 locations. This data should be, these locations, think of them as maybe stockyards or warehouses. I've noticed over the course of giving this demo a couple times that the square footage is kind of high. And the other thing that somebody might notice is that this is the kind of data that should come from this company's ERP. The data that I'm working on is not actually the data that would usually be updated in master data services, but it's good for you to be able to see columns that aren't too esoteric or quirky or frankly dreamed up by finance or marketing. These are things that everybody can lock onto. Square footage, the acquisition date, the manager. These things would normally be pulled in elsewhere, and it would be additional attributes that we'd work on. But just play along with me, and we'll work on it as if this company didn't have it in a system. Data is going to be consumed by a lot of people using spreadsheets, so a lot more people should consume this data than actually contribute to it. There's a few experts that really, really know this data, and we're going to enable this company to collect that expertise and leverage it. So we'll hit the magic switch here. A little flicker, and we're here. So notice I'm in Excel. I'm in an empty workbook. I'm going to start out by just going to the Master Data Add-in tab. So Master Data Services shows up in Excel as a separate add-in. It's a really small MSI that downloads and installs into Excel in just a few seconds. It can connect to as many Master Data Services servers, and it's doing this connection through the WCF API. And I've got a couple of different servers here. And we could go through the whole configuration and connection things, but setting up a connection that exciting? Right. So let's just go in like an end user would. We've made a few favorites. One of them has all of the locations. And so I'm connecting to the server, I'm pulling back the locations, and presto, I've got all of the locations. And I'm in Excel now. Anything that I want to do in Excel works. I can see for these rows, the sum and the count, right? This is just an Excel table. If I want to do some kind of fancy sorting or finding, I can get in here. I can look at Atlanta. Oh, wow, I've got, look at that, I've got 2 Atlantas there. So we found a data problem just standing here looking at it. And I'm not sure which of these is good, but actually this pattern where the dash is there, I like that better. And I can just use Excel, and I'm not using the keyboard like a real Excel user would. And I just want a regular paste there. You notice that's highlighted now. And so I can put a comment on that. So I'm correcting that. And you know what? Let's also whack that, because that's bad. And so that delete that I'm hitting up there is actually the delete that says, hey, go kill this on the server, right? If I just delete it in Excel, I'm not hurting the data. I'm saving the state of how you're editing it and then publishing it when you ask me to. But this delete is the delete of goodbye. So I got rid of that bad record. I want to go ahead and publish this change that I made. And so it's actually annotated my transaction for me. It said, based on the comment, if I wanted to change that here, I can put a period on that or something. And so what have I done here? I've used Excel to edit data that's then getting stored back in SQL Server. That's available through SQL Server Views now. It's also available through the Web UI if somebody was coming in through the Web UI for MDS. And I'm able to use the tool that I want to use. So if I was working on a different set of the data, let's say I was working on the locations that were owned, right? I've got this location type. And in fact, let me just go see what that location type is. Let me pull all of those back. This is the list of the location types. And I've got it right now so that I'm linked just to the code of it, or that's all I see when I look at the locations. But does everybody see what's going on here? I've just got a simple foreign key relationship. I've got these location types, and I can set those to whatever I want. And if I set it to something that's not in there, and I go to publish that, that's going to be a problem. So that's a bad location type. I want to go work on the locations that are of type O. What if I had 900,000 rows in my database? Or what if I had more than 1.2 million, right? What if I blew out the limits of Excel? Or what if my connection just wasn't that fast? Or what if I had 100,000 rows, but I also had 119 attributes? I don't want to pull all that data back and forth every time. I can set these favorites up based on the filter, or based on a filter. And so now I'm just going to pull a subset of the data back, the locations that I actually own. And I may have gone into the demo zone. I'm running a build here that is dated April 4th, just living on the wild side. We're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way, folks. It wouldn't be a demo without the demo gods at least throwing me one little quick stumble here. But I'm back in business. And you notice that my divisions are kind of messy there, right? The data's incomplete. And what I can do to start fixing that up is I actually know this data really well. Bakersfield and Riverside, those are like in the those are in the LAX division, right? Because I'm the guy that knows the data. And I do this all the time. I think we sometimes underestimate how the combination of Excel skill and hard work that the people that do this bring to bear. And I'm going to publish those, and I'm going to do as I say, not as I do here. I'm not going to annotate those. But this would get really tedious, wouldn't it? Because these things are not sorted in any particular order. And I haven't added a state column. I probably should do that at some point, and I'll show you how we would do that kind of thing. But what would an Excel person do? A person who's really good with Excel, they might just go reach out to this part over here and grab these characters and simulate a state for now by using an Excel formula. How many people are real Excel gurus in the room? I'll say we've got a few, so I've got to be careful here. I can't say anything off color, and I can't mess up. Don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up. Excel formula, it's not that hard, don't mess up. did I do? I messed up, guys. Yeah, I thought I hit tab there. Don't mess up. Don't mess up. And so now, because the table did that, I've got a little formatting problem. But I've been through this before. And then I got to edit it one more time to get it to stick. And that's an Excel thing, right? This is an Excel table. Once it gets in its mind that it's text, it doesn't think it's a formula. Once we convinced it was a formula, all is good in the world again. And then I can simply sort this. And now it makes it easy for me to see, okay, Iowa and Ohio are in the heartland. And I can use Excel. And so this is just going to be a little less tedious because I've got things sorted in groups. And I can go publish those and start cleaning up my data as quickly as I want. So what if I was focused on an even narrower part of data? What if I wanted to go look at just the things that were in the metro division? Turns out I've got a bit of data that's just metro. And here's where I'll show you how data validation comes through. I've just narrowed this down so I show the right stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and refresh the validation status. And I'll show and hide the status. And you see how these rows have an error? I can even sort things out to where I get to things, only things with errors, because I'm in Excel here. This is just another Excel column. And I see these things with errors. And I'm slow, and my glasses aren't that great. But it looks like if the square footage is equal to 0, then the square footage is not valid. I've got a square footage problem here. I get on the phone, and I got to be careful not to fix Brookhaven because it's actually a later part of the demo. I'll go to Freeport. It's actually 600,000 square feet. Count your zeros, hit enter, and maybe I know that the manager is that. Publish. Okay. Where did all those transactions go? Well, they're right here. You can see just practicing, I did my tech check. I've messed this up for tech check a few times. You can see all the transactions that have happened to this data, actually since its inception, right? So you see when it was created. So this data has been hanging around since May 10th. And then I've done a couple tech checks on this. And so I changed the data due to a talk with Fred once. Then I messed it up again. Then I messed it up again. Then I connected. And I messed it up again. Okay? So I can see all the transactions. This is a really good way to be able to see the state of your data or see why data is a certain way. Right? At this point, I'm going to move out of Excel for just a brief minute. I'm going to go to this enterprise email client called Live Mail. And this is where I'm moving through the features kind of in a disconnected way, but I think it's the best way to do it. I don't have a good linear path through this. So excuse the jump to hyperspace here, or the jump to a different place. If I'm a person that's responsible for this data, I don't want to go in and look at the data all the time. I just want to be told. I've always had this metaphor of a refrigerator that every time you open it, it takes the old milk and the bad orange juice and it says, here, take these things out. They're no longer good. And that's what's going on here. I've got this giant email. It's actually set at 100. Right? It says that this list has 100 things wrong, and we didn't send you any more because the data is so messed up. We decided not to spam you. I've got this thing set to send every 30 seconds, and I would actually show you messing data up and actually plumbing through. But I think it might be easier for me to take a handgun on an airplane flight than it would to set up an SMTP server on a Microsoft domain registered laptop. They don't smile upon people messing around with SMTP servers at their desktop. and you get shut down pretty quickly. So I'm not running an SMTP server, and I prepped these emails before we got here. I've got this new one here, and it's actually not new. It's, well, you can see I've hit the link a few times. I get this email, I open it up, and I go, oh, the location with member code 36, the square feet is equal to 0. I hit that link. The web UI for Master Data Services opens up. And I see the square footage is, in fact, 0. And I see the validation error. And this is the web UI. So it's got some different stuff, like the ability to tell you, hey, you can't do that, right? So it's actually smart about the data. Let's hit escape there. Hit cancel and just put it back as it was. Go over here and set the square footage. Okay. I can even go look at the transactions related to that. Okay. And we're done. I'm back in Excel. I can just refresh the data. And I think with this version, I'll need to refresh the status as well. And where's Brookhaven? So Brookhaven's now fixed. If I went and looked at my... If I learned how to click a mouse, right, you would think after this long, I could at least click a mouse. And so it's the same data. So there's two paths into it. The guy doing a bunch of work is going to want to use Excel. The person who's getting a infrequent email that just says, hey, this is something you're responsible for, it's messed up. So that's the notification part of Master Data Services. Yes, ma'am?
Put security on column level, or is it really spreadsheet level?
The question is, can you put security on column level, or is it just spreadsheet level? The answer is yes, you can put security on column level. And why, thank you for the segue into the administrative part. Well timed, nicely done. We did not collude on this. I've never met this young lady on the front row here. So yes, absolutely, on column level. So great segue into how somebody would actually do this from scratch and the administrative experience, right? What we've done up to now is for the end users. I didn't build any of this, I just used it. Now, come on, it's you guys. We're going to build this together. And I'm going to come over here and show you very briefly in the web UI that I've got a couple of different models. A model is simply a container to hold the data. And I'm going to switch over to this one called Modeler. And if I go to explore it, you'll notice there's no data in it at all. Well, I have to pick the version. And it's empty. There's no entities in it. There's no hierarchies. There's no data. So this is an empty, right? Nothing up my sleeves. We're not doing the cooking show thing where I pull this completed meal out of the oven and say it's that easy. I also have some data in Excel here. And I'm going to just close this workbook. When I close this workbook, I don't care because all my data was actually saved. I could save this workbook. I could even save pending changes. I could do it on an airplane and hook it back up. But I'm done with this workbook. I'm going to go get some information. This is the kind of stuff somebody would give to you and say, hey, can you build me a solution? And I'm going to go, yeah, I can build you a solution. So I'm going to grab this data. I'm just highlighting the range before I do it. And I'm going to create an entity. And that's just the range I was on. I need to use this modeler empty shell of a model. And I'm going to call this location. Now, I've got to map the unique identifier in my data to the unique identifier in Master Data Services. And I've made that easy right now. I've put columns with the same name. I've also got this optional additional identifier, and so I've mapped that as well. I hit OK. Behind the scenes, this is making the web services call. Master Data Services is creating the tables, creating the columns, creating the constraints, putting all the registration in the system tables. Now it's packaging the data up and it's sending it in batches, and it's loaded the data up into master data services. And I'm actually going to hide the status for now because I think that makes things less clear. And a couple things are not as good as what I showed you earlier. Like this division doesn't have that spiffy pull down. It's not constrained. It's just a text string. So now you got to do some data modeling, but this is what you guys know how to do, right? Data modeling is not that hard. I can either do this a very lazy way and kind of work from this most dependent entity. I should bring an ER diagram that shows location and all of the independent entities that contribute to it. I can do this really, really lazy. I can just take my location type, right-click, or hit its attribute properties, and you see that it is of type text. I can say, no, make this be a domain, and use the values that are in the column. So I'm just going to get a new table based on that, and I'm just going to call it loc type. Okay? So it's taking those, it's finding the unique ones, it's creating a new entity or table in master data services. And now I've got an entity called loc type. If I go out here on a blank sheet, I can pull those back. This is a really, really small entity, so from here I can actually just edit this or fix this by hand. And it automatically put the name in the code as the same. I've done this demo enough times, I know what these mean. L is leased, O is owned, S is sublet, J is joint venture. Anybody tired of me typing? I actually did that a lot better than I normally do. I can publish that. So I can work kind of from the inside out. Or if I've got all the supporting data, I can work from the outside in. So I can take my divisions and I can say, you know what, I need a division entity. Put it there. I'll call that division. And you guys have to bear with me as I build this whole thing up because it just takes a second. Okay. So now it's creating a table for divisions. And I want to go ahead and change those regions to being a table as well. And I'm sorry for the repetition, but I think afterwards you can like get a master data services training certificate because this is how you learn how to do it. And so I'm making a table called region. I'll only put you through this 2 more times, I promise. But you get the idea. I'm building tables, and behind the scenes, the foreign key relationships are being made, and all the relationships are being managed, and I can add new rows, and I can change spelling. And you see I'm pretty quickly getting to that model that I had in the other demo, and I'm going to put my managers in. Repetition is a great way to learn. And I'm going to leave the manager code blank. The name and code are going to be the same for now. I should have a better demo that's got a code with a proper, longer name, but I don't. All right, so now I've built all the entities, and I just need to go back to location, and I need to link it to the store manager. Okay? Now, what would happen if I had some mismatches here, right? I built this in one place, and I'm using it in another. Well, those would be errors, because they couldn't possibly be. I've said this is the domain of managers, but I didn't. So I didn't introduce a data error on purpose. And I also need to link that division on, right? And so now I've actually got a chained relationship from location to division to region. And that enables me in Master Data Services now to make some hierarchical arrangements of that data and to make views that can be consumed outside of SQL Server and to write rules, right? I've built that model. In the product as it is today, doing that in the admin tool, you would have had to actually make those columns by hand and then load that data into a SQL Server staging table, run the staging processes. The most experienced person, the best person at doing that would be at least 2 hours of work. And what was I, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes? And all you had to do is put up with my witty patter. So I'm going to go back to Master Data Services. And so now I've got this TechEd modeler thing, and I can pull it up in the web UI. I'll go ahead and maximize this out. And we can go look at location. And one thing you'll see is you'll see some old columns pop up here. This is because we don't kill any data. We don't get rid of any data. But so you see this division old. That's the old values that were in division. When we replaced it, when we replaced that column, we didn't want to break the data that was there previously. We can go get rid of those later. They don't show up in Excel. They do show up here. You actually have a lot of control over this screen, which I won't show you, but you can make groups of these attributes, define different groups so that people see different views, different collections of columns. So now things like the division are managed in a list, right? So I'm just picking which division things are. And I've got a little UI where I can edit it. Let's go in and make a hierarchy of these things so I can see these hierarchically. And then let's also put a rule on them so that we can manage them, so that we can just check the validation. So I'm going to go back out to the main page. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go deeply into versions, or I'm not going to even go into versions. But the idea is I can make as many versions of this data as I want. And this is where I would set up the versions, where I can look at a transaction and reverse a transaction. This is kind of a quasi-administrative area. Integration management is where I create a SQL view, which I'll do in just a second. System administration is where I write the validation rules and the model. In groups and permissions, this is where somebody asked about columns. This is where I would actually go and set access to a specific column, where I would actually say that these attributes are secured to a specific role. So it can get very granular here. Let's go ahead and write a quick business rule that says that the square footage can't be blank. Location. I'm just putting a name on it so we can keep track of it. And let's edit that rule. And I don't need to put any condition on this. I do need to put a condition on this. So if square feet is equal to 0, then the action is that it's not valid. Let's just read that and make sure I did the right thing. So if square feet is equal to 0, then square feet is not valid. Save that. It's pending activation. It has no notification on it. But if it did, and I'm the only person that's ever logged in, so I'm the only person that pops up in that. Now, anytime square footage is 0, I get an email. Okay, so we're getting pretty close to having built all this up that you saw in the other demo. The only other thing I want to show you is integration with SQL Server, and then we'll open it up for some questions. In integration management, I can see any batch that I've staged in. I can also establish, I'm getting ahead of myself, I'm sorry. I need to make a hierarchy to look at. And I'm going to call this hierarchy, wow, the web remembers that. I'm going to call it locations by region. And I'm going to just take location. Now it's looking at all the things location can roll up into, so it takes a second. Location can either roll into store manager or into division. I'm going to put division there. And so it's showing me what the hierarchy would look like. This is also the hierarchy that will show up in the web UI, and then people can drag and drop things around. Again, the focus here was Excel. This is a little something extra about the base product. All right, all done. We've built that representation. And now I can go do the integration management and set up an export view. And we'll call this for Tech Ed so it becomes clear what we see. And it's based on what we just built. And we'll put it on version 1. And we'll put this level-based with 4 levels. Now, it took the obfuscated underlying tables, it made the joins, and put those together into a view that we can then query, or some other system like analysis services can pull from to build the dimension periodically. And we can even see what that looks like. Refresh. And that's the view. And so sometimes people ask me, well, how would I integrate this with analysis services? Don't you have a connector for analysis services? No, it's SSIS, or BIDS, this, right here. And that's pretty, how many people are pretty familiar with analysis services? Can I get somebody to stand up for me that that's pretty easy to build a dimension from, right? That's almost textbook, right? Yeah, it's a flat view. Even if we built, and we didn't touch on this, we can support a parent-child hierarchy. It will build that flattened view of a parent-child hierarchy, and it will build a parent-child view of a flat hierarchy. It'll do both. Okay? That's really all the time I have to show the product. I could go on for another 45 minutes or so, but I would get thrown out, and the format dictates that I should take a few minutes for questions here. And so I'll go ahead and open up the floor. Remind me to repeat the question so everybody can hear it, and then I'll try and answer it to the best of my ability. Yes, in the back, sir.
Can you schedule the exports? You know how you exported that data to that view?
No, I created the view. Any scheduling, the question was, can I schedule the export? I created the view. I didn't go into a lot of detail about the version flags. And we actually haven't used a version flag here. But I can create a version flag that says this is the current version. And then I can check when the current version has changed and pull from this view. Scheduling is external to the product. We let other tools that are better at scheduling do that. Yes, sir.
Quick question. What's the flexibility of MDS rules? I mean, you show us a simple rule, but what if we want to go beyond that?
So the question is, what is the flexibility of the rules? The rules are simple validation rules. If you've got intricate rules, especially rules that need to do aggregate functions, like I'm here in a hierarchy, find something out about my siblings, find the highest sibling or the lowest sibling or the count. We don't do that. You would program those externally using .NET and the API. We don't. It's simple business rules for simple validations. You can do some conditional logic, but you can't do any iteration, and you can't do any grouping. I think you were the quickest.
That version number, is that a record level number, or I wanted to create a type sheet of memory base, but I inspect the view like I would in a data source,
The question is the version number a record level thing? And the answer is yes. At the record level, there is a column that says what the version number is, and every version is kind of a complete data set. So there's some replication, but that's okay for master data. We're talking about megabytes, not petabytes. And that version ID is linked to the version table, which has all of the information that you store about the version. So yes, it's record level. What you see here is almost what you get, right? We've just linked over and put something human readable instead of the, well, no, actually we've got the human readable and the database level ID in that view. Yes, sir. So the question is this a service or is this a database? It is, there is a SQL Server database here, and we happen to be in Management Studios, so, right, that's the database. Anything you can do with the database, right, you could back it up and restore it somewhere else. There's also a capability that will enable you to serialize the system deployment feature will enable you to serialize both the data and the structure. Yes. You could do it. Okay. You were...
I guess two questions. One, is the minimum requirement 2010, Office 2010 to use this add-in? In other words, Excel 2010 is needed for this add-in, or will 2007 work?
The question is, will this add-in run on Office 2010 or can you use 2007? The answer is you can use either one. So the add-in works with 2007 and 2010. Where I work, I have to run, I work at Microsoft, I have to run 2010. So yes, it's on both. And there's one other compatibility thing that brings up. R2 runs only on an R2 database. Denali, the next release, will run on both an R2 database and a Denali database. So the minute Denali is available, you don't have to upgrade the database in your data center. You simply take the SQL installer and install the web application. So the web application will run on 2 versions of SQL Server.
I have one other question. The interaction or the connection between Excel and this, is that taking place through port 80? The connection to the database, is it a web service that you're connecting to?
It's a web service. In my configuration, because I am easily confused, it happens to be running 80 here. But if you're good with IIS Manager, you can make that be whatever port you choose it to be.
I guess the point I'm getting at is you can do this across the web.
Yes.
It's done across the web.
Yes.
From Excel. Excel can modify the data from
Through any port you're willing to open up. That's between...
Very important to me. Thank you.
Yeah, that's your choice. Yes, sir. On the Excel, does it matter if it's 32-bit or 64-bit? Yeah, there's a 32-bit and a 64-bit add-in. Again, I'm actually running server on this laptop, so I'm running 64-bit, but it's both. Yes, sir.
And are you run it on 2008 R2? With the add-in?
Can I run...
Can you run master data services with 2008 R2 if you have to upgrade it to Denali?
The add-in only works with the Denali API. The API changes are few. I see one partner in the room, and they look very, very carefully at us when we say this. The API changes are few, but there's just that one little kicker that makes the Excel thing actually work. There's an additional call that makes Excel work, and so you have to use the R2 web server, but you can use a Denali. I'm sorry, you have to use the, it's too much stuff. you have to use the Denali web service, but that Denali web service can point to an R2 or a Denali database. So yes, you have to install the Denali web service. He's been waiting a while. Yes? The security that's in master data, the question is, do the changes from Excel have to be published? If you don't want to change, the question is about publishing changes selectively. If you don't have update access on a column, the service and the server stop that from happening. The security that you define in the service prevails. Excel has no way to get around that security. Okay? Yes. Security role will stop that. In the back there, sir.
Since you have multiple users, you can have the same set of data, 2 spreadsheets, trying to publish a change across the same records. How do you manage that? Who wins?
So the question is who wins if multiple people are publishing? And the answer is simply, for right now, it's the last one that wins. Yes? The question is, can you edit parent-child hierarchies in Excel? The answer is, I wish, not this, not yet. Right behind there. So the question is about kind of how many boxes this can be on? Yeah. So you can put this on kind of as many or as few boxes as you want, right? So think of any possible SQL Server configuration, right? And I'm actually, you could probably, somebody in the room could get me out of my depth on the options around clustering and I don't know if any of you have checked out the Hadron stuff, the high availability stuff, right? The options are just like unbelievable how many different boxes you could use to put SQL Server. Master data services could be on any one of those boxes or on some other box, right? I've got it all on one box here, but the web service could be on another, and the client can be on another, right? It's truly as many tiers as you want to put up. Does that answer the question? Yes, sir.
In the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned the whole MDS is purely based on dimensions, not on facts. Another important module in MDM is about event management. The event could be based off many measures. For example, in a banking scenario, low balance or multiple ATM withdrawals or something, that will raise a flag and people want to consume that through MDM. So, how do you do that in MDS?
No, that's more, the question is about events occurring and managing and trapping events. MDM is the data that helps you understand those events. So it's the information about your customers, your customers or their households, or your product portfolio in a banking scenario. The change to a loan balance is something you should look into Stream Insight. It's an ability to understand changes to data, right? Change data capture and Stream Insight. That data doesn't come back to MDM. That data goes to a reporting system or to a notification system. I think these things are orthogonal. I don't think there's an overlap there, and you should look into Stream Insight. Yes. How am I? Before I take this, how am I doing on time? Is it? I'm not being thrown out. We'll keep going.
I know you demonstrated using Excel as a effectively front end to the SQL database, MDS tables. What if there is a scenario that we
So the question has to do with what if data is managed kind of in multiple places? I would never get that to page up using that keyboard. There are some things that just can't happen. Let's go back to this. End users may be managing the locate. I'll go along with your example. They're managing the locations either through the web UI or the Excel add-in. You're taking data from external systems and either sweeping it in with SSIS or putting it in with .NET or BizTalk. Right? You have to build that implementation using other tools, using SSIS or .NET or BizTalk.
My question was, if the division is managed in an existing system, but division, seeing the division information is important for people when they manage applications, so we need to kind of bring divisions into
Yes.
an MDS view. So I'm assuming we still need to bring a division list from, let's say, ERP into MDS in order to show the
Yes, and you establish a process for that by doing integration. You can say, here's a division, here's an empty division table. Here's a process that pulls it in with SSIS and loads it and gets it validated, and it's maintained externally. I am actually starting to get pushed out here. I don't mind taking these questions. Well, the other speaker's not here. I'll keep answering them. Oh, he is? Okay. So I'm going to have to unplug, and I'll move over here and answer more questions.